The coaching changes at Alabama, when you saw him, Steele in defensive coordinator, Tommy Rees in offensive coordinator, what did you think about it?
I feel like Nick Saban was kind of trying to go back to his roots a little bit to finish off and grab another national championship. I think there are pieces of college football, maybe even the game of football and where it is that drive him crazy. And I first got a good look at this. I think it was 3 years ago, maybe two was last year. I had him one time, and there had been multiple press conferences after games leading in where you could tell the local media was trying to bait him into how bad the offensive line was, and it just infuriated him. And finally, after two or three of those games, which they probably didn't run for 280 or whatever it was, but still scored 42 points and won by 30, he said, listen, you guys keep bringing up this offensive line and how bad we are. He's like, what you got to understand is we can't go to practice every day and throw it, throw it, throw it, throw it, throw it, and then get in the game and get up by 21 and all of a sudden say, well, let's go move some people around. Let's bring out our bulldozers. And all of a sudden, we want to turn our gazelles into rhinoceroses and let's just go truck people. It doesn't work that way. When you don't do it, you're not going to be great at it. And I think that there is just a portion of where offense had been going that was bothersome to him. And he understands that it affects the other side of the football. And it affects his football team collectively because he knows. Think about the amount of detail that Nick Saban puts into everything. So he probably doesn't look at just offensive efficiency or passing game efficiency or run game efficiency or any other magical, made-up, mythical PFS statistic that gets thrown out there. He looks at what helps his team win games and most likely spends the majority of his time on what cost his teams the opportunity to win games and therefore lose games. So I think ultimately he wants to be more balanced. And if he wants to go run the ball 20 times in a row, he wants to be able to do that. If he wants to throw it 30 times in a row, they can be able to do that. And then defensively, that one was a little bit more difficult for me because I am not a media member that thinks Pete Golding was terrible. I actually think Pete Golding's a really good defensive coordinator, and I have visibly tried to present that to people for the last few years of, hey, I know you're mad that there wasn't a pass rush here, but when we're running a twist and the two defensive tackles really they clang the front of their face masks together like this in front of the center, and all of a sudden the middle three offensive linemen just don't have to block anybody, that ain't on the defensive coordinator. So now you could say, well, why couldn't you go to the next guy? And the youth development, maybe that was problematic. Okay, fine. But I know Pete knows defense, and I know he knows how to call defense. So, but I also know Kevin Steele's fantastic. And Kevin Steele, one thing that has not gotten a lot of discussion about him is he has actually morphed and taken some big steps as to how creative he is, how different he is. It's one of the things that I think Kirby has really allowed to happen with his defense the last couple of years with Schumann and Lanning is the creativity has changed a lot. And I think there are some things that Kirby probably would have looked back at 11 years ago and said, no, we ain't wasting our time with that. We do this and we do it this way. I think he's kind of said, well, no, we need to simplify this and make it look one way. Or you know what, we probably should run that front a little bit more because these guys can be more effective doing that. I think Kevin Steele has gotten there. And for a long time, he was just the other Nick Saban disciple, another guy that ran that defense and had his jack linebacker, and played, pattern match coverage, and that's what they did. But he has actually presented his defense in a very different way the last few years. So I think it will help because McElroy made this point on my show, and I never thought about this. He said, I think the problem with Alabama's defense right now is Nick Saban and Pete Golding are too alike in how they think about defense. Structurally, what they want to change, how they want to call it, who they want to play where. He said, so there's maybe a little bit too much groupthink happening defensively. Now, one thing I know about Kevin Steele, and I'm not saying they're going to fight or they're going to have like the Alabama coaching staff octagon in the middle of the day. Kevin will not be afraid to go toe-to-toe with Nick and will not be afraid to say, you know what, let's try it this way. And the main reason I say that is Kevin knows how to do that. Whereas maybe you would go in there with our chest puffed out and say, look what I found on film, coach, we're going to run it this way. Kevin knows how to dance around that, and he knows how to talk through that very politely, very calmly, in a very professional manner. And Nick has the level of respect where I think he'll listen to that, and therefore they will change some things philosophically on defense. They're not going out there and running the old 50 defense that the Bears ran in '85. I'm not saying that. but I think he will be able to have Nick Saban's ear just a little bit more to where he can do things in a little bit of a different way. And then offensively, I think you'll see more tight ends on the field. I think you'll see a more balanced rushing attack that's not going to be near as dependent on whether or not the quarterback wants to or feels like they should hand the ball off. The quarterback's going to be directed to hand the ball off more this year. And I think that's something that Nick Saban believes can help his football team as a whole this entire season.
You know what I wonder is, even with all the experience he's had, and the dude's forgotten a dozen times more than most of us even know about the game to begin with, even he understood there was sort of a little element of the unknown as to where the game was headed. And he himself adapted and evolved. I almost wonder, I don't wonder whether he liked it. I know he didn't necessarily love it, but I almost wonder if he looked at it and wondered, how far to the extreme is the sport going to go down this road? Because as long as it's headed down that road, I'm gonna try and ride the wave instead of trailing the wave. So I'm gonna go get the Bryce Youngs or the Tuas or whatever. I'm gonna go get Steve Sarkisian. I'm gonna try and stay at the forefront of this. But when he saw Georgia do what they've done the last 2 years, it almost feels to me like he watched it along with the rest of us and said, oh, wait, first off, yeah, obviously that still works if you can play defense at that level. And number two, perhaps that signifies a little pendulum swing. And if that's the case, if the sport is going to maybe regress a little bit back towards whatever I would have considered norm 10 years ago, well, we're going to dive in full speed. Because I think Nick Saban's always looked at it and understood that if the game is within 2 bookmark points of my familiarity, there are a dozen coordinators either side of the ball I can go out there to get and run my stuff with the players I'm going to give them, and we can win. So I watched the rest of the world freak out about the coordinator hires. And I know he's probably not reading the headlines, but if he were to watch that, I think he would have met it with like a collective yawn and said, you're focusing on the wrong thing, people. You're focusing on such the wrong thing. If the game's where I think it is, if my roster's where I think it is, I could put Joe over here. I could put Tim over here. If they have the requisite football knowledge, I'm going to give them the ingredients, man. Like the stovetop works. A bunch of chefs that could take my ingredients and cook a really good meal with it. We'll be fine. That's how I think he feels. Now, ultimately, we got to play the games in the fall to find out if A, he's right, or if B, I'm totally off base, or C, all of the above.
You're not totally off base for a couple of reasons. Number one, and I laugh at the people that say, well, Tyler Buckner's got familiarity with this offensive coordinator. That's a big advantage. He's definitely going to win that job. Not going to be that offense.
No.
And I talked to Bill O'Brien about this the last 2 years. I talked to Lane Kiffin about it. I talked to Brian Dable about it. You learn Nick Saban's offense. And we had Bill the first, I think 2 of the first 3 games his first year, and we kind of didn't believe it. And so I pressed him on it. It's just like this Bill O'Brien, this dude's a head coach in the NFL. Like, he's going to run his offense. He's like, no, you guys don't understand. I spent this entire offseason learning this offense. The terminology, the formations, the shifts, the names, all these. This is his offense. Now, I call it, and he lets me call it the way that I want to, but it's his terminology. So those quarterbacks that have been there, they actually have that advantage going into this. Now, and then, well, the other side of that, too, is I think people kind of just bypass the fact that Tommy Rees did have a part in bringing another quarterback in that put that quarterback on the bench, and who knows?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to pay attention to that. But I also think that, yeah, you're accurate in saying that there's a portion of what Nick Saban wants to do coming full circle. I think it started with Iowa State a couple of years ago when Matt Campbell was living in 13 personnel, 1 back and 3 tight ends. He had the guys to do it. How many people are running majority 12 personnel now? 2 tight ends, 1 running back. So there is a physical portion that is coming back. Michigan, we talked about them. Georgia, let's be real. They had some good pass catchers. They had Brock Bowers. They had good backs. They had a quarterback that won 2 titles and could scoot a little bit, but they won most of their games because they could bludgeon you at the line of scrimmage. That opened everything else up. And really and truly, the most magnificent part of what Georgia did offensively last year was the presentation of it and how they made it look, because they ran everything. Like literally, they ran counter, they ran power, they ran toss crack, they ran split zone, outside zone, inside zone. They ran tunnel screens, they ran perimeter screens. They had quarterback runs that they ran. They had replays, they had RPOs, and then all the formations, and then the motions that went those, and then the shifts. Whoever they had doing what they needed them to do knew how to do all of it, and that's a massive advantage. So I think there's a portion that is getting away from throw it 50 times. How close can we be to the air raid without being air raid and keep some semblance of a run game that is coming back and saying, hey, ball control can still be valuable. Protecting our defense still has value. Moving the chains has value. Living in 2nd and 3 and 2nd and 4 still has a lot of value as opposed to 3rd and 10 and 3rd and 8. So I think that was a massive part. I think you're spot on. I would totally agree with those were some big reasons why he made the moves that he did.